Everyone, welcome back to day 2 of annual plan hearings. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Kewen, and Councillor Peters is joining us on Zoom. Morning, Mark. There are no declarations of interest recorded, so we'll kick off with Bronwyn, please. Good morning.
It's a real shame because we have a shortfall on the South Christchurch Library. That's the library I go to weekly. And Aaron was quoted in the paper as saying we must learn to live within our means. But he was a champion of the stadium and the extra 150 million they found to sort it out. I mean, this is a disgrace in my view. This is a community library, and I wonder how many of you have ever been to it. Some of you. Good. Well, it's a lovely library and it's often very busy. And it is for our community. So I hope that certainly the money is found, and also that the name is changed to a Māori name, of course. I mean, South Christchurch Library is pretty boring, to be frank, in this day and age. You have excess land. This council should be proud that it has the greatest number of social houses of any council across the Motu, and I don't know anything about where the land is, but that should be land banked or built on for more social housing. People don't ask to be in these serious situations. Of course, the same old mantra, despite the fact that none of you campaigned on it, so it's totally disingenuous: selling assets. None of them should be sold off. Previous generations paid for these, and if everything that had been proposed to be sold off over the last 20 years, because we're in a serious financial situation, there'd be nothing left. And using a merchant banker to advise on the use or sale of our assets is an insult to ratepayers' intelligence. We know what they're going to say. It's in their interest to sell off, of course. I live near the Heskett River. It is a disgrace, and something should be done about it. It's time that you got the right staff to do all the jobs. This business of bringing in contractors all the time to do various things, get the staff. Tasman Council did the sums some years ago and realised it was cheaper to have in-house cleaners, which they now have. They looked across a whole series of things, This whole contracting business is a bit of a lark for the contractors and not very good for anybody else. City care should be owned and operated by the council within our city and not contracted out to other sites, to other cities. I think this competition is ridiculous, just as it is with the universities across the water. It's a really foolish idea. I just think we should be looking after our city and making sure that all of that happens. I think that's all I've got to say.
Excellent, thank you. Sam, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you for coming in and giving your passionate presentation. It's wonderful. Well, Aaron will definitely watch it back now, don't worry. In terms of the city care at the end, I just wondered how you felt about the government legislation around Three Waters, which has created a bit of ambiguity around the ownership of city care. So it's really good you're saying keep it in council ownership, but the new rules may mean that actually we don't get to keep that. It's still being worked through, but I just wondered how you felt about that.
No, it's not something really I'm up to date with.
Right. Oh, okay.
Yanni?
Yeah, thank you for the submission. Just wanted to check in terms of the properties. You've seen land owned by our council that is social housing should have community housing built on it. So I just want to check, are you okay us selling off like the land to like community housing providers as long as we require them to build housing on that specific site? Or are you concerned that we would like the Redcliffe's example, sell off the land and they could to them and then they sell it off and there's no requirement for housing?
Yeah, no, I'd like it to be more council housing. I mean, we've got this desperate need in this city, as they have in other cities. Right. And I just think it's very tough, and I think people should be able to have city housing, council housing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions? No, thank you very much for your submission. Thank you for coming in,
Yeah.
taking the time.
Kia ora.
Thank you. Right, next we have the Friends of the Botanic Gardens. And Jane and, I haven't got the other name, sorry.
Nat.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
So good morning, Mayor and councillors. The Friends of the Gardens, established in 1989, both fundraises and practically helps the Botanic Gardens. And in addition to the large numbers of volunteers we have who spend a lot of time in the Botanic Gardens itself, we also have a lot of volunteers who work with the Mona Vale staff as guiding ambassadors, maintaining the garden displays and updating collections. Mona Vale, as you may remember, was bought by the people of Christchurch some years back too, and it belongs to the people of Christchurch, and our friends represent them. So the Friends of the Gardens are recommending, forward, is that going to go forward? Here we go. We are recommending that the City Council brings forward to the 2023-2024 financial period the restoration of the earthquake damaged heritage Mona Vale bathhouse, which had been put back to 2029. Now, we're acutely aware that of the budgeting realities facing the council. So with this in mind, we have already raised $50,000 towards the cost of repairs through fundraising and public donations. Heritage is a key drawcard for visitors and tourism in Christchurch, which helps to create further business as well. Ongoing public donations are contributing to this fund, and more are happy to donate conditional on the council support to bring the repairs forward to 2023-2024. We've also had discussions with the Riccarton and the Fendleton Waimari Harewood community boards who have shown their support. Media coverage associated with the fundraising has raised significant public awareness and interest across the South Island as well. The garden staff themselves have got a clear vision for the use of the bathhouse to display a collection of semi-tropical plants, additional to what is grown in Cunningham House, which was there previously, pre-earthquake, and to include a water feature and appropriate seating for public enjoyment and community group use. And unlike many restored heritage buildings, once repaired, the bathhouse will be available for community groups and visiting public immediately after restoration. In addition, there's an option to hire out the facility for events and weddings. The Friends are working with a patron of scape art as well to commission artists to replace the fountain, which was once there, now in the lily pond, I think, in the gardens, to be created in keeping with the Edwardian style of Mona Vale, and it will be there as a donated item. We have discussed the repairs which were shovel-ready in 2017 with the council project manager, and at this stage he doesn't see a significant cost increase, which is encouraging. The repair costs are mainly in the concrete foundation and the labour, and we are concerned that if there is a delay in repair, costs will increase further as deterioration occurs in the building itself. So the Friends of Christchurch Botanic Gardens advocate that the Christchurch public and visitors to Mona Vale be able to enjoy this beautiful heritage building within the next year with your support.
Thank you very much. Have we got any questions? Yanni, please.
Just quickly, just to thank you to the Friends for the work that they've done, and I just wanted to acknowledge the fundraising and the efforts that have gone on in the recent few years. It is really much appreciated, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you for support from councillors who also attended our recent garden party as well. That was much appreciated.
It was very good. It was very good indeed. Thank you very much for coming in. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right. Now we have Richard, please. Morning.
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to give a submission on a discrete parcel of land in Diamond Harbour, which you would have heard a oral submission yesterday with some quite nice maps and pictures by Nancy Vance, a local resident who lives adjacent to the area. My submission is a personal submission. It's also on behalf of the Diamond Harbour Community Association. I'm on their planning committee, and I've been authorised to speak on their behalf of what they wrote to the council. And in addition, on this matter, we have the support of the local Diamond Harbour Reserves Committee. So there's a fairly unified view within the Diamond Harbour community about the future of this piece of land. I just want a slight diversion here. I want to thank the community governance staff for notifying us at a meeting, which we were talking about long-term planning in Diamond Harbour, of the fact that this piece of land was up for disposal. And perhaps the council staff could consider how they actually go about notifying the public of land disposals, because unless members of the public, every time an annual plan come out, scrutinise it looking for property for sale, there's nothing to actually let them know that land which is actually immediately adjacent to them or important to them as a community is being sold. Right, that's my suggestion for improvement. So coming to the piece of land itself, as Nancy would have eloquently pointed out in her submission yesterday, it is of high biodiversity in terms of the bird life. There are some weeds in there, but there are some exotic trees of some value. So therefore it's probably not suitable for clearance from that point of view, and it's suitable for restoration. It's not suitable as a building site because of its shadiness, because of its wetness, and general enclosure. And it's, but it does have value in terms of its proximity to key community services. Because it's actually adjacent to the medical centre, the community hall, the rugby club, the playing grounds. In other words, it's not an isolated piece of random land in Diamond Harbour that's just of no value in terms of the community. The community have always valued this piece of land. And to put that in perspective, within the council's district plan, it is zoned as open space community park. It's not zoned residential, it's zoned community park. In addition, we have a start-out point management plan for the reserves there. This could easily be added to that. And finally, in terms of the previous council work with the community on this, in 2016, we jointly prepared a village concept plan for Diamond Harbour. A lot of effort went into that over a few years. And this particular area was suggested as an alternative garden area and for the management of existing trees. So it wasn't considered for disposal, it wasn't considered as a surplus piece of council asset. The council and the community agreed that it should be held on to for some community purpose. And so retention as a biodiversity reserve, given its non-suitability for buildings, and also the fact that a whole lot of services run through it, and it's a high drainage area, and it's also an access area for a lot of residential houses that otherwise have no access to their properties by vehicle, is that it will actually add to the existing biodiversity network, which is actually highly valued in Diamond Harbour, and there's a lot of community effort goes into restoring local sites. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say that it should be kept, given a reserve status, it should be kept by the council, and there is quite clear commitment from local residents and other people in the community to helping with its management. Just as in other recent examples, a large amount of community effort goes into assisting with the restoration and improvement of the Morgan's Gully reserves and other reserves, Stoddart Point Reserve, and also the recent example of a piece of land on Te Rā Crescent, which the council sought once again to dispose of, but the community rallied around together, and now it is a local park, a beautiful area for people to use and appreciate, and that is actually maintained by the local community itself with, at the moment, negligible council input. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Has anybody, that's very clear and carries on from what we heard yesterday. Thank you. Celeste.
Thanks, Richard. Great presentation. I just have a quick question around the process for notification. Do you have any suggestions of a useful way that we could approach that, making sure that residents in a particular area get notified? Would it be a letterbox drop, or would it be something?
Probably a leaflet drop to people who are immediately adjacent to it, or some kind of notification to people who are immediately adjacent. Also, if it's obviously a piece of land that may appear to be of importance to the community, putting something in the local media, Facebook page, the local Diamond Harbour Herald, for example, the property section should seek some guidance from your excellent community governance staff on these types of matters. And we've been a long history in Diamond Harbour of the property section attempting to dispose of land that is of a high importance to the community. And it's not that we're opposed to council sales of low important land. We haven't made any comment about the sale of the old post office, for example, in the village centre. Yes, it seems quite reasonable that that be sold for some future commercial purpose. But there are other pieces of land, like the land above, which you're probably familiar with now, the land above, by Bayview Road, the large area of land that it took us a number of years of campaigning against the single-minded activities of the property section to rapidly dispose of that. Now we've finally got to the point where the council is preparing a comprehensive plan for its future purpose.
Thank you very much for coming in. That's very clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay, is Stephen here by any chance? Thank you very much. We're running a wee bit ahead of time, but thank you for being here early, Stephen.
Good morning.
Morning.
I started off this presentation, I'm speaking for myself. I'm a member of a number of groups to do with cycling and groups not to do with cycling, but I'm speaking very much on my own behalf today. So I started off with a map of Christchurch that I remember when I was last here, 40 years ago. The cycle ways that were published on that map have been formed into a sort of a network, even though the city was made up of several councils back then. But it's living in Christchurch as a student, which is probably most responsible for the fact that I'm a very committed cyclist. I spend a lot of time cycling. I've had 30 years away, but most of that's in the South Island. I've been close enough to keep an eye on what's going on. I'm going to talk about the kinds of attitudes to cycling. Some people call this types of cyclists. There are people who have just no interest in or no ability to cycle. No way, no how. There's a large proportion of the population that are interested in cycling. They might have tried it a little bit, but they're afraid and put off by the need to ride in traffic. There are the enthused and confident people who are already riding, but they could like to see some improvements, and their experience could be better. And there's also the strong and fearless that are prepared to ride in any sort of traffic. These categories are originally from the US, from a city called Portland, but Wakatahi have been using them in some of their cycle planning. Now, they all have different issues and different attitudes to using infrastructure. If you went across the list, it would be no, yes, probably, possibly. If you ask them about their attitude to building infrastructure, it would be no, hell yes, what is taking you so long? Or yes, that'll be nice. The fast and fearless might be a bit indifferent. They've got by without cycling infrastructure, so why should anybody else have it? Lots happened since then, all sorts of things, but the biggest event for Christchurch was the earthquake, and that's been an opportunity. Just a couple of years after the earthquake, this was published, the bold new plan for major cycleway routes. And it's a concept framework, and but one of the things that is in there is Harewood Road. This is where we've got to now. There's good parts of that. Reality hits, then there's parts of the city where things are sorted out. We've got that link out on Harewood Road is still being promised. This is a map that's printed on the corner of cycle maps we give out to everybody. Here was Harewood Road. Now, I live in the northeast, and there's not much happening there for cycling ways, but we get by. I haven't generally been part of being an a nervous cyclist, but one of the things I've done recently is got involved with Wednesday Wheelies, which is a social group for that sort of cyclist. And so I've got involved leading cycle groups for that. And one of the things we've been doing is mapping those cycle routes to help leaders find their way. And this map is a map of all the rides that I've been asked to ride for the Wednesday Wheelies. So we're catering for those interested but concerned cyclists. So we've been getting out and about, even in the northeast where there's no major cycleway routes, we've found safe routes. But there's a gap there. There's a gap there in the northwest of the city, and that's where I think we should be working on that cycleway. Is that gap real? I asked the Wednesday Wheelies if they do go in there, and they said they've tried it. There's a lot of routes that they are avoiding because they're not safe. That would currently be Memorial Avenue, Wairakei Road, Harewood Road, Northcote Road, Island Road, Clyde Road, Greers Road, Graham's Road, Breens Road and Fennelton Road. So I think we should be pushing forward and linking that cycleway into the network. It's also linked into the closest point, the best point to cross Johns Road and access things beyond that.
Okay, you're good. Now, we are slightly ahead of time, so I'll let Kelly have one question.
Great. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for coming in. Like me, you cycle all over the city. Do you see a lot of cyclists in our area? Obviously, we live about a kilometre apart over in the northeast. Do you see a lot of cyclists there?
I see a smattering of them. I mean, I generally use Martians Road as one of when I'm in that strong and fearless mode. It's my way of getting into town is to flat down there. If I'm want to feel a little bit more relaxed, then I'll choose other routes. So I'll switch between that green, yellow, red type of cyclist, just depending on what my objective is for the day. This morning I decided I wanted a bit more relaxed thing, so I just headed as soon as I could down to the river, followed the river into town.
Yeah, it's linkages on our side of town, isn't it? If we could just get a few links into those other cycleways.
I mean, if you know where links are, you can use them. I mean, the red zone has got a few usable streets that cyclists can use as shortcuts. Yeah. Some of the major arterials have got good paths along them, like QE2 has got a path, but you've got to figure out how to get around that big roundabout at QE2 Innis.
Yes.
And Hills Road's got an underpass under QE2. You learn, you get a knowledge, and you can get around.
So we need a bit more, publicity about where those little bits and pieces are. So something more official.
I mean, your cycleway map's got the big things, but it didn't tell me there was an underpass at Hills Road and things like that.
Yep. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, Celeste, we're out of time. Thank you very much for coming in. That's very enlightening. Thank you. Is Ross here, please? No. Mark. We're running a bit. Yeah, g'day, Mark. Yeah, I see you up there. Thank you. We're a wee bit ahead of time, so thank you for being here early. Thank you for coming in.
My apologies, I wasn't quite prepared to be so early. Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity. We'd just like to acknowledge the work and professionalism of the council's heritage team, and we request the councils pass on our appreciation of their work. In addition, we consider Canterbury Stories and the website to be a successful initiative, and we commend the council for funding this project, and hopefully, I haven't seen specific that they will continue funding it. I recently attended a workshop, and it was actually a really, really good workshop, the way they conducted it. So I think this is going to be a great opportunity to work with the community, and it's something I'm quite happy to tell the rest of Canterbury about, and have done so on many, many occasions. We also draw attention that the Toi Orioha Rolleston House Community Arts Facility we consider a great adaptive reuse. We've argued in the past on many submissions to Community Board and to this council that we should go to the community first to see if there's a use for any of the heritage buildings for adaptive reuse, and I think the council's default position should be first up, go to the community before you seek other options. I know in one case of one particular building where right on the discussion that I understand, I listened to the staff presentation on that one, they thought the first option was demolition. And so they went through that process because they considered that was the logical conclusion. I'm not sure because of our intervention, but that building is now, I understand, up for the plan change and is due to be scheduled for protection. So we think going to the community first is a good thing, and this is a great example of this one as well. As regards, we've noticed the council's got, as regards the old student union, which has been referred to as the old Ducks Deluxe, the council's having discussions with the Arts Centre Board. We encourage that according to what we understand with the press, and we think it's a great option. One of our reasons that we think it's a better option for the board to be repairing its own building, and it makes any commercial lease a lot simpler from there on in our negotiations. The only suggestion we could make in regard to this, has the council considered extending the targeted rate that applies to the Arts Centre? I mean, it's there already. Extending it would enable, and the board could then borrow against it, and it may not fulfil or use the entire rate, and they could continue. They could actually start repairing the building, whether that could be a consideration. Related to that, you'll see that we've got some attached documents, a take from a PowerPoint presentation from Donovan Rickamer, who was a building economist. He's a fairly unsentimental building economist. In other words, Heritage has got to work as an economic performer, not because of sentimentality. And we just included those because some of them are very interesting. Like an example, in Norway, only 6% of money spent, only 6% to 10% of money spent by Heritage is actually spent on the site. The remaining site is spent off-site, so they're literally facilitating. And the following page on Mount Vernon, we draw your attention to that Heritage visitors visit twice as many places and spend 2.5 times as much money per trip than non-Heritage visitors. We've included those in there because we considered it important. And we've got other details that as well, the importance of Heritage as a facilitator for money and the type of tourist that attracts. In addition, you'll have noticed we've got a number of commentaries. We've also got a request that in the process of the historic Canterbury Provincial Council buildings, that we support the council doing something about that, finally facilitating something. And we just request that the public be involved right at the beginning of any discussions about the building, its future, etc., and the process of repair and how you're going to go about that process of repair. We think it's important. The reason we asked this is this building is we've been concerned, is those of us who are slightly long on the tooth, we had concerns about the approach of the old municipal building where it was put into a tendering process and the public was excluded because the tendering process had a commercial privatisation and privacy issues, so therefore the public was excluded from that process. We think the public should be involved in that process as much as possible in this one. It's an internationally significant building of international significance, so we consider the council has custody of this building, and therefore the public should be aware of what's going on with this international treasure. That's all I can cover in the 5 minutes, but thank you for the opportunity.
Yep, your timing is impeccable. Thank you very much for bringing that to our attention. Thank you. Good to see you again. So we've got Ross here, have we, I think? Yep, welcome Ross. And you bought some armour with you as well, have you?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Sure. Good to see you, mate.
Yeah. It's been brought to our attention that despite talk of 3 units per section of medium density housing, this is truly just a blind, as there's not an upper limit on housing units per section, only a lower one. The public have been conveniently and left uninformed of this fact, perhaps even deliberately. For instance, next to us, we've got 13 apartments going on one block. Before any further development takes place in Hornby, we request that our infrastructure woes be addressed fully. As you're aware, we lack suitable foot traffic facilities in our shopping centre. With planned housing at both Gough site And the South Hornby school site, as well as potential housing also at the former Sockburn school site, foot traffic set to go through the roof. We're seeing water meters being disconnected for developers. Why? Why should residents be presented with water bills for excess water when you are creating the problem of water shortages by connecting multiple properties without meters? Under the New Zealand Bill of Rights, it's illegal to discriminate. What is this if it is not discrimination? All body corporates should also be facing water charges and excess charges as a requirement. The ratepayers are not here to prop up these developments. Hallsville Junction extension appears to be a complete disaster, with mixed messages coming out about it. One report we've had says it's about for tender. We're also hearing once again it's held up by KiwiRail. We currently have a Lagoima request in on KiwiRail requesting all correspondence between the council and themselves, so we can try and define just where the blame lies. Intersections of Branston, Edmonton with Hallsville Junction are a disaster waiting to happen. Trucks bank up here, cannot get through. We're seeing school children and adults playing dodgems with cars when trying to cross over Gilberthorpe's Road and Springs Road near Aotea Road. It would appear that there's a lot of pure guesswork in the annual plan, as it cannot be accessed by the public. And we ask that the data under ID numbers be accessible for viewing. You cannot access those ID numbers.
Yeah, right.
We ask to be treated equally with the rest of Christchurch ratepayers. And that means water charges be distributed evenly, not just on those with meters, and for traffic lights in our required and dangerous areas, as well as footpaths that are up to standard in our shopping centre. If you cannot supply us with this, then we suggest that perhaps you need to consider removing one footpath from each of all shopping centres, including the town centre, to put us all on an even keel. Think of the money you could save on the budget with only one footpath to maintain. As we've said in the submission, these are interesting times, with the AF8 quake, which is overdue, predicted to lower massive areas of land to below sea level, and then Monday's paper predicting 25% of properties flooded by 2100, we wonder why council are still issuing building permits for these areas and not on solid ground. Perhaps this needs discussing with central government, as they are the ones ultimately responsible. We've asked before if you're going to provide gondolas instead of bus transport for these residents. Are you? Well, that's us for this year. Okay.
Thank you very much. Melanie, then Yanni.
I was just wondering if you could speak to your comment on the city vacant differential. You had a comment about the vacant site differential, and I couldn't quite understand what you meant by that comment.
The vacant site differential. That's in the original submission.
Yeah, you mentioned
Not
the
this.
corner of Selwyn and Brom, so I wanted to
Yeah.
find out what else it meant. No.
The corner of Selwyn and Bram Street, there's a block of,
Yeah, I know that.
There.
I know exactly what it looks like.
yeah,
I'm
they are just lying there idle.
But it looked to me like you thought that that differential shouldn't apply. Do you think it should or shouldn't?
I don't think differentials should apply. They should be charged the same rate as anyone else. They shouldn't be given a subsidy to keep going the way they are. That's basically where we're coming from there. We don't believe their rates should be subsidised in any form or manner.
Right.
While they lie like that, they should have to either fix it up or sell it on to someone that will fix it up.
Yanni,
thank you.
reasonably quickly, please.
Just in your submission, you talk about the increased growth in Hornby, and then you contrast that with the central city. Given that you've got a number of infrastructure things that you're asking us to fund, would you support deferring some of the central city projects so that we can actually do the things in your community that you're raising in regards to the footpaths, making it safer for people, etc.? I mean, the obvious one is the Te Kaha streets, but there's other central city projects that we've got that are taking a lot of money and resource.
Well, there's a lot of money comes out of the Greater Hornby residence area, probably a fair amount. Let's face it, and very little's going back to it. It's all been sucked for the last 10, 12 years to other areas, and we have got no argument with that.
going into road.
We have no problem.
Getting back to Yarny's question, yes.
But yes, we do believe a footpath is essential on Main South Road. The Stantec report was done in 2020, and I believe NZTA, I've got an email from NZTA that they will be pushing for this to be included again next year to get that intersection area sorted out of Carmen Road, Main South Road.
Okay, thank you very much for coming in, and good to see you again, Mike.
Good to be here.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're in for the long haul, you team.
Okay, Summit Road Society, Marie, please. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou, nā rā te mihi mai aha kia koutou. And I'm Marie Gray from the Summit Road Society. I think most of you know the Summit Road Society. We're a grassroots conservation organisation working to protect the Port Hills, and we own and manage 4 reserves on the Port Hills and lead the community trapping program Predator Free Port Hills. So we don't have much time, so I'll focus on the key messages. You would have read our written submission. The Society's long-term vision is around the reforestation of the gullies of the Port Hills back into wetlands, shrublands, lowland podocarp forest. And really the events of up north bring that to the fore. This has actually been part of the council's own waterway strategy since 1999, and the rangers are doing an amazing job, but the work is just simply going too slowly. And we need to bring about transformational change in this area. Related to that is the investment in the erosion and sediment program. So the council has earmarked $9 million over the next 10 years. $9 million is a great start, but it really needs to be like $90 million. For us to restore Avoca Valley, that's 38 hectares, a 1 gully system back to bush, it's $2 million. And you know that is relying on a huge volunteer component. It's probably actually really about $2.5 million. And so that's the scale of the investment that is needed in the restoration of our gully systems. And last year, in July, it was the heaviest rainfall on record for a month in July, 300 millimetres, and we saw significant slips in Lindwoods Reserve, our reserve in Heathcote, which is very bare. We're undertaking this restoration, and we saw multiple slips. We lost hundreds of our new plants that we had just planted. And when you think of a built-up environment like the Port Hills, if we saw the weather that we saw up north with 300 millimetres in 1 hour, what will be the impact on the urban houses of the Port Hills? It will be devastating and it will be expensive. So actually investing in the restoration of the gullies of the Port Hills makes complete sense from biodiversity, from community wellbeing, and from economic, because it is about building resilience to heavy rain events that are coming. Just also like to reiterate our support for Pestry Banks Peninsula. They will give their own submission, but we are doing great work here on the Port Hills with 1,500 trappers. And now we've got the emergence of Predator Free Christchurch, which is really exciting. Every time we have a meeting, there's a new 2 or 3 groups joining that network. So huge enthusiasm from the community around Predator Free work. Would like to lend our support to allocating additional finances for the rebuild of the South Library. The Summit Road Society uses the South Library extensively, as do many community groups, and we'd like to see that shortfall of $2.5 million budgeted. On the Port Hills Management Plan, that has been talked about a long time. It is now time to fund it, to resource it, so that we can address all these many complex issues around biodiversity, the ecological and cultural values, reforestation, biodiversity, recreation, fire risk, and antisocial behaviour, all in the context of the whole. We noted concern about the red zone properties. We have seen firsthand rockfall. Rockfall risk is a real risk, and we are concerned about the proposal to put some of these houses back into some of these properties back into housing, because we know that rockfall risk increases with heavy rain events. And we just really ask the council to think very carefully about the future risk for people who will be living on those properties. I'll leave that there because we don't have much time, but thank you for the opportunity.
Okie dokie. Timothy.
Thank you for the work you do, and also mentioning the South Library. It's really appreciated.
Cool. Kia ora,
Thank you for coming in. Good on you. Next, we've got Chrissy, please. Good to see you again.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Kia ora koutou. This is a personal submission, but I do talk of what Marie has said. I'm now in the Opawaho catchment, living there, and I see the effects of erosion on the portals. So, I've just put up if I could, I've just put up a summary of the few of the points I addressed in my submission. I'm not going to speak to them all. I'm going to speak about the Uniform Annual General Charge. But I do say around the South Library, many of us have put a lot of time into the consultation around that. People are really grieving about the loss of that building. It's an essential and loved community facility. And people have come to terms with it not being there for a while while it's rebuilt. To now push out, rephase, using that rather platitude expression, but to push it out now would really be disheartening for that community. So, and on the other hand, what you need to do is increase the budget to allow the building to go ahead and to allow all this landscaping that's also proposed around that to go ahead. So it's done as a full project and not left half-heartedly done. So please do not rephase that. But talking about the Uniform Annual General Charge, I thought I'd talk about this because possibly not many people have addressed this for you. But I think it was introduced in the 1990s as a $100 charge. So it was to reflect the uniform services provided to households through the city. It's increased over time very, very slowly till 2018 when it got up to $117. And then in the last 5 years, it's increased annually. You note that any increases between 1996 and 2018 were only done at LTP time, so they were only done in every 3 years, not every year. So there's been a change in thinking, a change in trend in the last 5 years, which is concerning. You'll be aware that the Uniform Annual General Charge, the higher it is, the bigger load that there is on the people with low value housing, which tends to align with people who are on low incomes. But additional to that, there's been other uniform charges added. So in 2009, targeted rate, a uniform rate was added for the 3-bin system, or actually for the 2-bin system, for the recycling bin and the green bin, and that was around $140. And again, that stayed constant for about right up to about 2018 again. It's a bit hard to see my colours, sorry, but that's the orangey line that's been added in. And then again in the last 4 years, and I think there was some COVID spending increase is there, it got increased 2019 and a big increase in 2020, and then it's been slowly reducing. The other two uniform charges that were added in 2015 and 2018 were for active travel and for the cathedral. So not significant numerically, but they do add up. So the total that is now as a uniform charge on households in Christchurch is $367. And that's really gone away from the thinking of the $100 that was introduced in 1996 and it was not intended to increase to such an extent. So I support reducing the Uniform Annual General Charge to $50, and if you do that, that total that people would be paying as a uniform charge would be $257. What this would do would be an opportunity for you to send a message to people in these really tough economic times that you understand people on low incomes are struggling with their rates, and this would have an effect of reducing their rates. So I think it's a real time for this council to speak out and to reduce this regressive tax and to put it to put it back down. If you put the UAGC down to $50, you reduce that total. So please think about it. It's an important aspect of what you do. It's something that not many people think about, but I think you do need to think about it seriously. And I appreciate that you gave that as an option in the annual plan, draft annual plan discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good. Thank you. Everybody's happy? Good to see you again.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming in. Right. Pam. Yep. And then, yeah, Pam.
You might need to break.
Yeah. So, okay. So we will break now just to let us all catch up and see you here very soon. I won't be here. Pauline will be sitting here. I'm away for about 20 minutes.
got a new system of elections happening. Yeah. Thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, that's what we need. All right, so we welcome Pam Richardson. Nice to see you.
Yeah, tēnā koutou, tēnā
Far
koutou,
away.
tēnā koutou katoa. So I am a farmer, and I work very closely with North Canterbury Rural Support Trust, which is an organisation that's vital in times of strife. I'm just going to pick out a couple of things from this is my personal submission as first. And the first one is about inundation and erosion, and it's happening across Banks Peninsula. So here is a photograph of around the Pigeon Bay foreshore. In August 2011, we planted this area up. Today, that's what it looks like. The area was quite an area of planting. That lamppost was on the land. Today, it's surrounded by stones, and the water surrounds it when there's a high tide. So what I'm asking for is I've done this several times before, and I know Littleton is in the process of looking at the inundation and erosion in the Littleton Harbour. I know that the community board might have asked that Akaroa and other areas on Banks Peninsula perhaps become the second tranche, but I'm asking that we look for some simple solutions that we could have as a community to just keep it back a little longer. That is the road into round into the bay on the left there that you can see, and the next photograph looks the other way. It comes from the bridge and goes round into the village part. So you can see how the post won't fall over because the Orion have put things down below that will keep it there. So all I'm doing is asking for that we can work with council to come up with a process that will allow to do it. We did do it around the War Memorial, which is in a reasonable condition now, and working with park rangers. The other one is our water supplies in Banks Peninsula. Both the Devotionals and the Pigeon Bay have got issues with them at the moment. Pigeon Bay has got a glossy sign on, a flashing sign, conserve water, and Devotionals, they're carting water when it rains. So I want to know we as a community want to know what's happening. We want an update on that. So I'll just leave it there. I hope you've read my submission. It's short. You should be able to read it. Any questions on that?
Right, so we've got just over 2 minutes. Have we got any questions for Pam? Anyone?
Will there be some actions? Will they generate actions with Pam on those updates she's asking for?
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm keeping a bit of a list of what people are kind of asking, but I guess staff are doing that as well.
Like an action track up the... Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, given the couple of points you raised, Pam, which are really valid, it would be good if we can get internally generated some feedback to Pam on those issues.
Be great. Really appreciate that because I've done it before and we've had no feedback. So would appreciate that.
So Pam, when you're talking about inundation and erosion and community input to sort of help to mitigate that, A, are you talking temporary, and B, what form would that look like? What are you thinking?
Well, the rest of this bay has got rock. It's got stone walls and concrete walls, of which the council repaired some concrete walls. There's not an easy solution to this. You can see the road's right there, and it's not a good answer to say to me, right, we'll let that road disappear and then we'll do some major work on it. So if there was something that we could do, just simple, a rock wall, it was simple, that we get approval from ECAN, and that we could do it together as a partnership.
Yeah. So is that the main road around?
Yes, that's the main road into the township, into the foreshore at Pigeon Bay.
Yeah.
And then if you go the other way, and you'll see the other way, if you read this, recently we had a major car accident on State Highway 75, and they used the access round through Port Levy, over the Holmes Bay, over into Holmes Bay, and around, into Akaroa that way. So this would also impact that if it's not looked at reasonably soon, it will also perhaps prevent another access to Akaroa.
Does it ever get the high tide come over the
Yes,
road?
the high tide does come up, not there, but around a bit further it comes over the wall. No, this is just erosion hitting the bank and wearing away the soil.
Yeah. Okay. Tyrone, have you got something?
Very quickly,
Yeah.
if I may. So Pam, kia ora, Pam. So you mentioned briefly the sort of the coastal hazards adaptation planning stuff, and I know that you want simple solutions kind of brought forward, but in principle,
you would support an increase in that program to
Yes.
be able to, because as I understand it, there's only 4 staff currently input, and they're doing Littleton Harbour, but it would be great to be able to.
Yeah, maybe it's a long-term plan solution,
Yeah.
but it needs to be addressed before we lose everything.
Yeah, no, cool.
Yeah,
Thank
but
you.
it also needs to be addressed through that process, and I don't think there's any other real way around it. But what we've heard from Banks Peninsula is they want to be like the second cab off the rank. There's a willingness for community engagement there. I think that's coming through. Alrighty, thank you. So now we've got Pam Richardson.
Yeah, the Federated Farmers submission. Look, we've been coming for a long time, and Nick Clark has been coming with us, but this morning he hasn't been able to come. He's had a recent bereavement in the family. But I've been coming with him for a number of years too. So our bullet points there give us a summary of what we're looking for. A couple of years ago, in 2021, we talked about no surprises approach in our annual plan submission, and it was agreed that there would be a rural forum would be considered. And then at the end of last year, when we had a whole lot of things impacting, it was decided that it would be left until this year. So it hasn't been begun. But I see that as an ideal way of, if you know what the issues are, and you can debate them, and you can resolve some of those together. And in 1.5, we're talking about all of the new things that are coming in. And then the other important part about it is that we could actually look at civil defence and working with how we're going to work together. And we have got civil defence and we work closely with them. But if we had a major event on Banks Peninsula, we need to be very, very active in how we actually all work together. We cannot afford to be lost. So that could be considered as part of that rural forum. We also did provide at the time some information about the Auckland Community Board, or the Auckland District, and they did have a rural forum up there, which we can certainly provide again. But John Filsell was quite keen that we actually progressed with it, so I'm a bit surprised it hasn't come back to us, but no.
Yeah, and I think we need to get some information on that.
Yes. But quite happy to be a part of that.
Yeah.
No surprise policy. And I just must say how much we enjoy working with the council staff. Nick did ask a question around the rating system and had a very quick reply from Tessa Zant and the financial team. And then if we just go to the back page and talk about the capital program, and it's important that we actually focus on what other things are important to our city. So, but I'd imagine that the long-term plan is going to be quite a considerable project, and maybe an increase in funding for us all if we're going to deal with the issues that we're dealing with.
Yes. All right, so that's you.
Is there any questions?
I was going to ask that. Are there any questions? I just wanted to make sure you'd finished. Yanni?
Just picking up and appreciate the submission. Just to kind of clarify or ask the question, are you suggesting that we write to central government to seek an increase in the rates relief that they can give for low income?
Well, if there is an
one of the
opportunity, but
ways?
that rates rebate has been at $500 for quite some time.
Yeah.
And there are other that have gone up recently. The other benefits have gone up recently.
So it's the income threshold and the quantum.
Yes.
So I think that's a really good suggestion. Can we make sure we capture that? I think I raised it in the draft as well, but it'd be good to do that.
Yeah, because the income threshold's really low, isn't it?
Well, especially, the cost of living going up. I think would be
And
good.
to make it easier for people to apply for it, because there may be a number of people out there that
Just
don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I know you send things about it in the rates, but no, it might be helpful to provide a bit more assistance.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Yanni. So we've captured that. Those are 3 points. All right.
So there are a lot of ticks in our submission from Federated Farmers too that have been very helpful. So, yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Pam, for your continual good work for the community. It's fantastic.
Well, I enjoy it, and I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
and it's about getting the best out of people.
Yeah, together.
All good. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so that's those 2. Mary Gray. Marie, is it? Yeah. Marie, I'm sorry.
Marie, sit in that chair. It's higher.
Oh, thank you.
Pauline Jackson, apology, he had to head out to a meeting.
Yep. Kia ora koutou. So this is my personal submission now on behalf of myself. I put my submission is quite long, and the reason it's long is I really actually care about these issues and I put a lot of thought into it. But in the interest of time, I'll concentrate on a couple of points. I put in my submission that image that's come from the IPCC report about what the projected temperature rises are for different age groups. So my dad, who's in his 70s, likely to see 1 to 1.5 degree rise in his lifetime. Myself, in my 40s, 1.5 to 2.5. But it's actually the bit that really upsets me is my children, who are likely to see 2 to 3.5 degree. 1.5 degrees is already considered very low for this generation. Now, I love my kids. We all love our kids and we want to do right by them. And that's what I think. What are we doing mucking around? What are we actually doing? The scientists have told us we need to halve our emissions by 2030 and we need to go faster and we need to take it seriously. That's 7 years away. And that's why I am so strongly in support of cycleways and in support of investment in bus lanes in the public transport system. I myself and our family, we have been working really hard at this and we have reduced the Ks driven by 40%. And, you know, I think we've done that because of buses and because of cycleways. I often use that Quarryman's Trail. And, you know, I have immense sympathy for people who find change really hard. It's hard when things change. It's actually really hard to even come to terms with the reality of the situation. It is hard. But I also think it is actually on all of us to put the priority on our children, not on ourselves. And, you know, I think that when people get their head around this, when they actually do get their head around this, they will also agree. And that's why I have the view I do on rate rises. A local government is quite constrained in the mechanisms it has to raise money. And I am less concerned about keeping rate rises low for myself now and more concerned with my children's future. And I am not rich by any means, and the cost of living is biting, but it is something I really care about. And some of the other issues I've raised, ecological restoration, I think you probably know my views on that. And the other one I do want to mention was the uniform annual charge, because while I am prepared to pay more in rates, I do absolutely acknowledge that for some people they actually do not have that money. They are on the breadline, and that's why I want to do what we can to reduce the impact on those who can afford it least, while actually the rest of us who can afford a bit more actually work for all of our future. So I'll leave it there. You please read my submission. I put a lot of work into it, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Marie. It was a really helpful submission, and I appreciate the urgency that you're telling us about these things. And some of us around the table totally agree with you that we've got to act. We've got to lead, really, in this area. We're doing our best. Has anybody got a question? I don't want to take up all the time. Such a clear submission. Thank you. Okay. So, what are we doing now? Another break.
Just wondered, you know, how we're keeping like an action tracker thing. Can we get some information to people about what's actually happening with Wheels to Wings and the NZTA funding? Because people keep saying it's being delayed, but my understanding is the funding is the issue. It's not a delay, it's the funding timing is different to what people expected.
Oh, is that right?
So we resolved to defer it for up to 12 months based on some new information, which that is that our funding within the financial year had gone from, no, the calendar year I think had gone from, because it's how Kotahi do it, had gone from possible to unlikely, so it hadn't been cancelled. But the likelihood of us getting funding ahead of that 12 months is still high. So
Yep, 11:30 back. Sam, have you got a minute? Have you got a minute?
Yeah. Can I ring you? I just need to go and drop something off.
No, that's cool.
Is it through me?
Yeah.
Well, Phil said you talked about night about. Oh,
Yeah.
have we stopped?
Yep. Yeah. Apologise if anyone heard me say a swear word just before I forgot there was people in here. So, anyway, it wasn't too. Yeah, thank you. That'll do. Right, so, Jenny from the Cass Bay Residents Association, welcome. Please start on your submission.
Morena. Firstly, the Cass Bay Residents Association would like your help with our community facility. You will be pleased to hear we're not asking for any money for this, as we've offered to raise the money ourselves. We wish to build a community facility that will be a regenerative, sustainable, and ecologically sound design, which is shown here, which will fit in with the historical setting of other buildings on the Steadfast site. This would replace the building that we have been offered, which was originally an open-fronted 3-bay garage from the 1950s, which had a front added in the 80s and is now in a dilapidated condition with asbestos, borer and black mould, and a building report has said is uneconomic to renovate. We have a proven need for a facility in our growing community, which will enable us to be more resilient and strengthen local feelings of belonging, as well as provide an emergency hub in the event of an emergency. We have that wasn't meant to happen. We have a community, we have been in negotiations with the Christchurch City Council for 3 years now and ask for your support for a resolution so that we can get started before building costs go up even further. Secondly, we support the ongoing funding of the head-to-head walkway, which will be a great draw card for Christchurch tourism when it's finished. Unfortunately, the popular stretch from Cass Bay to Pony Point have several major slips on it last August. Geotech reports have said that an alternative track is needed, as this section is likely to fail in other areas in future. Currently, people are using a rudimentary track, pictured here, to get to Pony Point that has a gradient of 1 in 2.5 or 40% in some places. A lady has slipped and broken her ankle on it already, and many people have been asking me when another track can be made. We request that money be allocated to upgrade this track to provide an alternative with a better gradient and surface as soon as possible. And lastly, I first approached the Christchurch City Council in 2017 about our playground, parts of which date back to beyond the 1980s. I was told then it was due for renewal in 2022-23, but this was pushed back to 25-26 in the last long-term plan. This popular playground is heavily used, not just by locals, but also by people from Christchurch and further afield who come to our beach, including many school groups. We ask that renewal is not further delayed and that the bench seats and retaining for the bark softball, which are both disintegrated now, be replaced in the interim while we wait for the renewal. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Jenny. Now we've got a couple of questions. I think Tyler.
Kia ora, Jenny.
Kia ora.
Can you just talk to us about the resolution with staff and what you actually require to get the building underway? I wasn't clear.
At the moment, we have the concept plan, which was up on the board earlier. We need them to approve that before we can move forward.
Okay.
So basically, they originally wanted us to renovate the old garage, and we've had reports done, and the latest building report was that it was uneconomic to renovate.
I see. And that will include demolition
Yes,
of the site?
or there has been a suggestion that it is moved to another part of the Steadfast Park domain.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's our whole thing. We need that moved so we can move on, basically.
Thank you.
So is it, it's on council land?
Yes, it's in a council reserve.
And so if council agreed with you that a new building is the way to go?
Hopefully. I think actually they may be having a meeting today to again discuss it, that we haven't, we're waiting for that approval. I think that we have. The last meeting I had with park staff was that they said that we could go ahead with a new build, but they still haven't accepted our concept design or a definite that we can move ahead. It's taken so long and the prices go up all the time. And
Well, this is the thing, isn't it, with community projects? It's the thing with everything, but it's a bigger impact on community projects, I think, because the funding's so challenging. So
I
maybe
think-
in action we could get some information on where that's sitting. And I
Yeah.
assume that the community board would be working with you?
The community board have been highly supportive of us right through,
Yep.
especially with the idea of a rebuild, a new build.
Yeah.
And they have worked quite closely in supporting us with that. Yep.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get you some action.
Thank you very much. That would be
All
much
right,
appreciated.
perfect. Thank you so much. So,
Thank you very much, Anthony.
the Canterbury West Coast New Zealand AA District Council, Bill Greenwood. Welcome.
Kia ora, everybody. The Canterbury West Coast AA District Council thanks you for the opportunity to address the panel on behalf of our 127,000 members in the Canterbury West Coast and the 1.9 million members within New Zealand. Our organisation is focused on road safety and transport mobility. I'm Bill Greenwood, a retired Principal Transportation Engineer, past member of the District Council with local, national, international qualifications, knowledge and experience. With one exception, the Canterbury West Coast AA District Council reiterates our full support for the draft annual plan. Especially, we support the proposal not to start construction on the Wings to Wheels cycleway for 12 months to give councillors, staff and the community a chance to address the fatal flaws in the cycleway design identified in the consultant's safety audit. As an association, as I said, we're focused on road safety and mobility. We intend to fully support and participate in the safe, more efficient and cost-effective cycleway in conjunction with the local community. The Canterbury West Coast District Council's one exception to fully supporting the draft annual plan is the proposal to move to 2024-2025 the level of service improvements at the Greers Road, Northcote Road, Sawyers Arms Road intersection. Recent changes, especially the Northern Motorway construction, have further overloaded this particular intersection and the adjacent network. The AA District Council is especially concerned regarding the limited capacity right-turn facility. Councillors, I'm sure, are aware that this intersection was built by the Waimarie District Council 30, 40 years ago and is a very, very short right-turn bay into both parts of Sawyers Arms Road. So effectively the right-turn bay fills to capacity and the traffic is then diverted actually onto Herwood Road, and the model suggests getting this intersection done will reduce the volume on Herwood Road by 4,000 vehicles a day, which can only assist the cycleway in that area, obviously. There's been significant increases occurring and going to occur, particularly with the development of the foodstuffs site, where Countdown is going in, Marion College is going in, and the facilities for foodstuffs is being expanded. And this is obviously going to further exacerbate the problem. And what happens is twice as many heavy vehicles use Sawyers Arms Road than Herwood Road, but what happens when the intersection fills up in the right turn bays, that traffic continues along onto Herwood Road, which is obviously a problem with the poor facilities for cycles there. So the District Council supports the Council's desire to cut rate costs. You know, we've got a difficulty there and we recognise that the Council does have the job of balancing budget, but there is also a cost to the community and a poorly designed intersection like Greers, Sawyers Arms, Herwood. So the intersection is clearly not fit for purpose at the moment. With the changes on the foodstuff sites, it'll be even worse. So the AA District Council strongly requests the reinstatement in the annual plan to 2023, the construction of the, or commence construction on the Sawyers Arms Northcote Healers Road intersection. I might add that in last year's annual plan, the District Council made a submission on this intersection and the Langdon Road intersection, and we're very grateful it was moved forward into this current year, but effectively understand the budget concerns, but there is a cost in leaving it the way it is. So we would request, please, can you actually reinstate this proposal? Any comments or questions?
I think Sarah has one, and there's 50 seconds left.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bill. Agree that the intersection needs upgrading in soon, which is great. Just a little, I'm just curious, the submission that we've got in front of us looks like a personal submission with comments on water use and those kind of things as well. Is there a separate submission with the AA, or is...
No, my submission is from the Ordnance Association.
Okay, it doesn't say that on the submission.
I'm not making a personal submission.
Okay, right. Just wondering if it had been made clear to you, your comments on the wheels to wings, that we're actually not changing the scheme design. The resolution that council passed was to work on the detailed design, not the scheme design. And I'm just wondering if that's been made clear. So it was, safety things around access ways, those kind of things, not a change in the overall design that's being worked on. So no...
I understand the statement is not starting construction on the Wednesday Wheel Cycleway in 12 months to give councillors and staff time to work closely with the community to address concerns about the design. That's the wording.
Yes, that wasn't quite...
That's the wording in the annual plan. I'll just quote it.
It's supposed to be a noting.
Yeah, it was on the detailed design. Yeah, the resolution was on the detailed design, not the scheme design. So I think we might need some clarity for members of the community over that one.
I think it should be clarified. I don't think detail was there.
Yeah, no, in the resolution we were, I think that needs clarifying. Thanks.
So if we could just clarify the budget too, just get something on our website maybe, because we're getting a lot of submissions on Wheels to Wings and we don't even seem to know what's happening with it.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in. And now we have Tim Say from the Save the McDougall campaign.
Noted that.
Well, good morning, and
morning, Tim.
Thank you. I must say I'm a little bit disappointed there aren't a few more councillors here. I was particularly wanting to meet the mayor because he's declined to meet with me, and I was at least hoping today I could speak to him. But never mind.
Yeah, I apologise for that. He's got a meeting
I will email
temporarily.
him
But
anyway,
Tim, this meeting is being recorded, and he can watch it later
well, I
on.
appreciate he's busy, man.
Put a special request in that he watches this part of it for you.
I think he's meeting with the Prime Minister, actually.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
Oh, well, he really is important. Right, that's more important than me. Right. Well, this is your older councillors will know me, new councillors won't, but for your benefit, this is the 6th time I've spoken to 3 different councils on behalf of my Saving the McDougall campaign, and because there are so many new councillors, I think I'm going to have to bore your other ones and just go over the whole thing once again. Now, going back to the basics here, the simple fact is when the previous council in October 2020 leased the gallery to Canterbury, the McDougall Art Gallery, to Canterbury Museum for 50 years in complete secrecy, without telling the citizens of Christchurch who actually happened to own it, let alone my family, they created what I believe is a big mess. Why? Because, 1, they dishonoured the largest gift, as far as I know, that was ever given to the city, because it was given in 1928 so the city's own art collection could be established from generous gifts of works, mainly from the Canterbury Society of Arts, given to the city in 1932 when the gallery opened, on the condition that a new gallery was built. The gallery was given to the citizens of Christchurch, not the museum, and my grandfather is on public record, 12th of March 1928, in the press, saying he wanted it built well away from the museum and to be a gallery for the city. Number 2, why were they able to dishonour the gift? Because it was given on trust. My grandfather simply wrote out a cheque for an art gallery for the city's new collection. His accompanying letter is in your archives. He completely put his trust in the 1928 council to protect its future use in accordance with his and the city's wishes. He didn't require a deed of gift or a statute to be created or it to be put into a continuing trust. Leanne Dalzell's council breached that trust, surely the greatest breach of trust ever by a Christchurch council. 3. But the previous council also dishonoured its own heritage strategy, created in 2019 to protect the future use of its own heritage buildings. This applied to the McDougall as well as its other heritage buildings. It promised that the historical, cultural heritage of the council's own heritage buildings would be protected in accordance with the International ECOMOS Charter that it had adopted in 2010 and which is recognised all over the world. The heritage strategy would have protected the gallery's future use as being the same as in the past. That's the point of it. The terms of the lease were developed in 2019 by the Social Committee, and its working papers, released in November 2021, actually acknowledged that the terms of the lease would not comply with the conditions of the heritage strategy. Despite this, the council decided to proceed with the lease. 4. At the request of the museum, the existing McDougall Act was changed in 2003 to allow the McDougall to be used as a museum as well as an art gallery and able to be leased to a third party. The museum, in their recent redevelopment newsletter, is trying to argue that because they will use it in compliance with the McDougall Act, this will be in accordance with the terms of Robert McDougall's gift. This, of course, is completely incorrect, but herein lies the problem. Its possible future use, as permitted by the lease agreement, only specifies that it must comply with the McDougall Act, and as a result they can virtually use it for anything. So the whole thing is just hopelessly loose. Finally, the museum, as explained in detail in my submission and recent press release in the submission, and I've gone into great detail as you would have seen, do not have an art collection of a public art gallery standard selected on the basis of its artistic merit, nor in an exhibitable condition, and are unlikely in future to have sufficient funding from you to carry out the necessary conservation work that would be required for this. And in the past,
So
they have
that's just 1 minute
consistently
left,
used
Tim.
their own art gallery.
1 minute left.
I beg pardon?
That's just 1 minute left.
Yes, that's okay. And in the past, they have consistently used their own art gallery and other spaces only for the display of modern art, which is incredible, really, and it's for a museum, and especially street art and graffiti, which the chairman, David Ayres, has told me recently has been with the approval of not only Anthony Wright, but also their staff and their board. If the lease agreement does not better specify its future use, I fear this will end up being the ultimate use. Perhaps now you understand why my family is so concerned. Simple as that. The good news is the answer is very simple and it won't cost you any more money. Do what everyone else has done. Honour the gift by turning the McDougall into our Museum of Historical Art, as every other city in the world has done with their old gallery. Use the McDougall for our wonderful historical collection of 550 oil paintings and 350 watercolours currently in storage at the Christchurch Art Gallery. I've just had a look around the gallery, but no longer displayed to the public.
Thank you, Tim.
And separate out the display of historical art from contemporary art, that's traditional art, for the benefit of the viewing public. That's what every other city in the world has done. Why are we doing anything different?
Yeah, thank you very much.
That would solve the problem completely.
I think that councillors have got the message from you and read your submission. So thank you for coming in. We've got people waiting, so that was 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Tyler, there's no time for a question.
So no one's got any questions.
Thank you. So, George Latston here. Welcome.
Everybody?
Welcome. So you understand it's 5 minutes?
Yes, 5 minutes, yep.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is George. I am a 26-year-old who lives in the Waltham suburb. My primary means of getting around is by bicycle. And I very much enjoy using the current network of cycleways around the city and use them daily. So thank you. I don't own a car because the current network allows me to get a lot of places safely that I don't need to for 99% of trips. I'm here to highlight two parts of my submission to the annual plan: the water rates charge and the capital expenditure program, specifically the Wheels to Win project. First, the water rate charges. I'm happy that the water rates charges are coming into force. It is going to reduce overall water network expenditure, and I fully support it. However, I don't think that it's fair to increase the water limit to 900 litres. 700 is already well above the average user, and it's not fair that the majority of users who use less are subsidising those who use more. I'd also like to see small incentives for installing water-saving measures, such as forgiving the charge for. I'd also like to see small incentives for installing water-saving measures, such as forgiving the charge if water-saving measures are implemented on the property, similar to how if leaks are fixed, the charge is forgiven. I believe this will pay dividends in the future by investing in water-saving improvements early. Secondly, I am concerned that the Wheels to Wings cycleway is getting construction put on hold while more consultation is gathered. I don't see how more consultation requires the construction to be stopped. From what I understand, the project has already gone through a lot of consultation with the community, and I don't see how another round will change the design that much. That requires construction start to be delayed. As a city, we should be taking climate change more seriously and stop wasting time and just get it done ASAP. A bike or scooter is a much more efficient use of space and resources, unlike a car. As for my personal experience, I've biked down only a few times due to the living on the other side of town. But every time, it has been an unpleasant and at times heart-racing experience. Having the cycleway installed would greatly increase the safety factor of me cycling down Hayward Road and be a great addition to the citywide network. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Short and sweet. That leaves time for questions if anyone has any. Yanni.
Thank you for your submission. Do you think we should? I mean, do you have any comment on whether you're supporting us deferring the MCRs along the Apawaho Heathcote River or the Avon-Ochakara River?
I would prefer them obviously to go ahead as soon as possible. That's the one that goes. Is that the one that goes down from Eastgate to New Brighton, or is that the one that goes along follows the river?
So there's the two that we're proposing to defer.
It's not along the river though.
It's the one direct route. Yeah. I would. I don't support deferring it.
Right. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Excellent. Celeste.
You mentioned you rely on cycling as your main mode of transport. Do you feel that there is sort of perhaps a shift in a bit of a mode shift, particularly among younger people, and where we might not have heard from a lot of younger residents? So it's useful to hear from people who perhaps rely on a different mode of transport without sort of really thinking about it. Can you just share your thoughts?
I think there definitely is, like you said, a mode shift. Like within the last year, I've sold my car and we have gone down to a one-car household, and my wife will also bike to work maybe 80% of days, and I will use the bike exclusively, basically. So I think over the past few years, with the introduction of the MCR routes, it has provided a legitimate alternative to people to driving, basically. Yeah. So I think yes.
Fantastic.
Great. Thank you.
Great answer. We've got time for 38 seconds. Tyler.
Kia ora. What hesitancies do you have cycling around the city, and are there any times that you actually feel really uncomfortable cycling around Christchurch?
Anywhere like high traffic roads, like anything with like 2 lanes or more, is very nervous. It makes you feel very nervous, because even though there may be even a painted line on the road, it feels like a big truck barreling past or a car could just go into the lane because it's not protected. So those points where there's like just a painted line on the road, it makes you kind of feel a little bit exposed. Yeah. So specifically, if you're like maybe like Morehouse Ave, and I think Beeley Ave are big ones.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for coming in and giving us your views on what's important, and also thank you for your efforts in reducing your emissions. It's going to help us get there. Thank you.
Thanks.
So now we have Suki Thompson on Zoom. Hi, Suki, for the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group. Go ahead. You've got 5 minutes.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thank you for the time to speak today to your annual plan. My name is Suki Thompson, and I represent the Banks Peninsula Native Forest Climate Change Group, an informal interagency alliance of 15 major agencies comprised of experts, landowners, and community conservation groups seeking the landscape-scale regeneration of native forests to mitigate climate change and address the ecological crisis. And I'd like to thank Pam Richardson, our representative from Federated Farmers, for being at the physical hearings today. Thanks, Pam. So our submission addresses 3 main topics: draft annual plan before us, the Council's climate change resilience strategy, and the upcoming long-term plan that you'll be starting to develop later this year. So we support the existing programs and funding in the annual plan for the Biodiversity Fund, for Pest-Free Banks Peninsula, and for the Rod Donald Banks Peninsula Trust. And we strongly support the climate resilience strategy which you have developed. But where we see a mismatch is between the strategy itself and the level of funding that has been allocated to achieve reduction targets and the goals of this strategy. The funding levels allocated for biodiversity are tiny compared to the Council's overall spending. Now, we recognise that in the annual plan you don't have much scope to change things. That's why we wanted to bring up the long-term plan at this point and ask that in this next long-term plan you make it much more clear and explicit on how you are going to fund and drive through the changes to achieve the climate resilience strategy. Specifically and particularly the first goal of net zero emissions by 2045 and the goal of using the natural environment and restoring it as a carbon sink. So here's where Banks Peninsula has this key role to play for the city. We are approximately 70% of the territorial area of Christchurch City, and native forest regenerates really easily and rapidly on the peninsula. So it provides enormous scope to act as an offset of residual emissions for Christchurch City and achieve the net zero target. To do so, much more of the landmass will need to be covered in native forest, and that's an achievable goal if it's a more attractive option. So what we're really seeking from that long-term plan is that the funding for the climate resilience strategy is much more clearly identified in the operational and capital program listings, and that there's a breakdown showing how much is going into climate change work, and that there is a much greater funding. We suggest a 10-fold increase would not be unreasonable for programs such as the Biodiversity Fund, the Pest-Free Banks Peninsula Grant, the Rod Donald Trust support, and support we'd like to see added for the Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust to help fund its work on these large-scale regeneration projects. And that type of funding is just such good value for the city. Lots of work done by local people, land provided by private landowners, a very small percentage of the Christchurch City Council budget, but could really help achieve the climate strategy. So that's what we're asking for. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thank you. That's loud and clear. Thank you, Suki. Any questions? Anyone? No, very clear submission. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us by Zoom. Really much appreciate your comments. Right.
Okay,
so,
thank you. Bye.
Jeffrey Sugden here. Welcome.
Hi. Right, so my name is Jeff. I'm a 37-year-old living in the Papanui ward. My submission is actually going to pretty much echo what George said. To add to what was said on the water rates charges, it's something that we've seen working and reducing water use already. So I really can't understand why we would, then raise the average daily allowance to 900. To me, that just seems to be going backwards. And in regards to the wheels to wings, and in fact all major cycleways, I don't want to see any of them deferred. We are in a climate emergency. We need to be acting on that. Cycleways are a way to do that, and everybody should have the right to get where they're going in a safe and efficient manner, whether that's by bike, by foot, in a car, public transport, whatever it is. And the wheels to wings especially, but other major cycle routes are a great way to facilitate that. So keep it short and sweet, so thank you.
Very short and sweet. That leaves us plenty of time for questions.
Yep.
Melanie?
Have you talked to your local councillor about your views?
I have not actually. I do need to.
I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I think she's on Zoom, but whether she's listening. Yeah. Yanni?
I am on Zoom, thank you, and I am listening and noting.
Thanks, Victoria.
I was just wondering, did you support the previous comment too around the water charges of trying to provide incentives for people to look at rainwater capture and reuse, greywater reuse?
Yeah, I would agree with that, absolutely. And even in my written submission, I actually put, although currently we're on a shared meter, so not being charged, but we're a small two-person household. Potentially if the bureaucracy of administering it wasn't too high, I would even be in favour of households such as myself having a smaller water charge, because we don't need 700 litres a day, and
Can we just ask? I mean, like the rainwater stuff just keeps coming up. Can we get an action to get stuff done on that? I don't know we're making an action list of things, but it would be good to get some information around that if we can.
But haven't we brought this up? Are you talking about water conservation through rain tanks and?
It's incentivizing people, because a lot of people are doing it, are trying to do it, but it's incentivizing to collect rainwater and reuse it for whatever, or greywater reuse. So there's a number of things we could be doing as a city.
So what are you asking for? Some investigative work done on that, or?
Yeah, how we could look at it in relation to the excess water charges to provide a kind of carrot for people to, save water.
Right. What's the feeling around the table on that? People want.
I'm in agreement.
I get asked all the time what council's doing to encourage collecting things like rainwater, and so some information would be useful. I get asked all the time. I imagine others do.
I get asked all the time as well.
Well, there's clear directives there to at least get some advice and some information on how we might be able to pick that up as an action. And Kelly, did you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you, Jeffrey. Can you just talk a little bit about your personal cycling experience from where you live to where you go to, and how that works for you and what you're seeing out there?
Yeah. So I would class myself as a very confident cyclist. So we're a one-car household. Both my partner and I bike as our primary means of transport. And yeah, I find the major cycle routes as they are already to be very pleasant to cycle on. I find the 30-kilometre lower speed zones to be very good to cycle on. And yeah, there's very few places that I don't feel comfortable. Harewood Road is one of those places. I do still bike down there from time to time because it is on my way to work. So I work in Hornby, so that's one route that I can take. And yeah, basically it's typical of the sort of road, Harewood Road, Blenheim Road, those large roads with 2 lanes and very little space for cyclists are kind of pretty much the only place that I personally feel uncomfortable. In saying that, I shouldn't be the target for these cycleways. It should be to get more people out on their bikes and encourage those who don't have the confidence that I do.
That's great. And look at that for timing, being on. Thank you so much for coming in.
Cool. Thank you.
Take care out there. I hope you're on a cycleway. All right, so we've got Jeremy Dixon. Jeremy here?
Yep.
Great, welcome.
Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for time. Jeremy Dixon, past chair, CCNZ Canterbury Westland, and current national board member for CCNZ. Here to talk on the capital spend reduction proposed in the annual plan. So you've got my report. Apologies, there was a couple of paragraphs at the end that were part of a cut and paste effort from earlier that got left in. The general gist of it's there. I'll touch on the main points. So firstly, we do understand the CCNZ and really appreciate that it's not easy for council to go through this, and they've got to get the best bang for buck and spend money in the right places. The pressure on people is immense at the moment financially, and what I'm highlighting here is that sometimes saving $1 an hour is actually not saving $1. It's actually worse for the wider economy. One of our key strategic objectives of CCNZ is to promote a healthy civil construction industry, and that helps promote a wider economic strength. So the proposal of council to reduce the capital spend by 136 million over 23-24 is really concerning. I spoke to the council a few years ago on the long-term plan, and was concerned then that the long-term plan was already undershooting our asset investment we needed to keep it at pre-earthquake levels, and what was left settled on was significantly lower than what was needed, and now we're continually undershooting on the annual plan, and we're proposing to do it even further this year, which is a real concern for us. One of the points raised in the annual plan is that it's due to resource, and it's not. I can tell you categorically, it's not a resourcing issue from our industry. We're heading into an economic recession, or we're in an economic recession at the moment. The residential market is dropping pretty much overnight. It's dropped around the rest of the country, and it's dropping rapidly in our region in Canterbury. So the subdivisions are slowing down. The commercial market's slowing down. Waka Kotahi have pretty much said, Canterbury, you've had your money. You're not getting any more. You'll get your bits funded through the council, but it's largely a massive underspend in the South Island compared to the North Island. And now the local councils are also got rates pressure, so you guys are looking to reduce your spend. And what that does is puts immense pressure on our industry, and our industry is a key cog in the machine of the wider economy. And if we underspend there now, it is going to have impacts on jobs. People will lose jobs. Those people are ratepayers, or they pay rent, and that allows rates to be paid. It hits, usually that sort of pressure on the industry hits the lower end of the smaller businesses, SMEs, and people that probably can't handle losing their jobs. The other aspect is if the work's not here, they'll go to other regions or other countries where there is work. And at the moment, Canterbury, there's a lot of work in the North Island. We'll lose good people to those areas. And once you lose those people, it's very hard to get them back. So saving $1 an hour will have a much bigger impact in the future, because it'll only cost more to do in the future. You'll lose good skilled people out of this industry and out of this region, which very hard to build up. We work really hard during and post earthquakes to build up skill base needed to deliver the infrastructure that's needed in this city and the greater Canterbury region, and we're really at risk of losing it. And you guys can only contribute so much, and you're only responsible for so much. But we've got 3 or 4 things lining up to make an economic storm here that could cause real impact. We are the single biggest employer in the region. When you put all the suppliers, the contractors, the consultants, the engineers, the client base set up, we are the single biggest employer. So if the money is not coming into this part of the pool, then it gets really tight elsewhere in the retail and hospitality. So that's it in a nutshell. We know you can only do so much, but...
Jeremy, we've got some questions. Do you want to
take
some questions?
Take some questions.
So we've got Sam, Mark and Sarah.
Yeah, hey, thanks very much, Jeremy, for coming. It's good to see you again.
Yep.
2 things. Firstly, just out of interest, where, obviously representing the sector, where do you see the massive skills shortage in your sector, or where is the resourcing pressure? Because unless I'm talking to different people,
there's a resourcing pressure from a year ago, but I think it's turning right now, and there's not going to be a resourcing pressure going forward.
Right.
Canterbury really hasn't had a resourcing pressure. Residential market's been very, very buoyant, and there's been a lot of money and effort spent in there, and there's a lot of resources sucked up in there. That's pretty much turned off. So all those companies working in the residential space will be available to work in this space and do the infrastructure.
Yeah, so just so I'm clear though, in terms of the residential stuff, are you sort of saying the the contractors that do the subdivisions.
Subdivisions, not
Yeah.
not vertical
Not
builds. We're not
builders
talking
and
about
stuff like
building
that.
houses or buildings. We're talking about building pipes in the ground,
Yeah.
roads, pavements,
Yeah.
the power, the infrastructure you need.
So I guess and just the other one, Pauline, if it's okay, is just around our spend at the moment each year. The challenge we have is actually it's the deliverability, so it's not the affordability. So, for example, this year we're struggling to spend about 390 million on internal capital, and that hasn't been cut for quite some time. So I guess I just would be keen to get your thoughts on the actual proposed reduction when we physically can't spend any more because of the deliverability aspects. Like our biggest challenge is getting the planners and the designers.
It's an internal and slightly external deliverability issue. It's
Yeah.
how you've structured your procurement, how you've structured your delivery of your capital program. Our opinion.
And I guess just finally, just to give you some assurance, we're looking at about 465 million this year, even though we can deliver 390. So I just hate for there to be a perception out there that we're cutting everything, because actually it's really around that deliverability longer term.
Well, we would have liked to see more in the last 12 months as well. And there's only so much.
So would we, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is there was significantly more on budget than even we've got than we're delivering now. So it hasn't been an issue of cutting, it's the practicality of actually delivering it, which has been the challenge. Yeah.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark, just very quickly, because we're kind of out of time.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Pauline. Really interesting to hear your thoughts there, Jeremy, and interesting to hear the dying off of the residential market and the subdivisions. Do you think that there'll be ability for your contractors to jump into this space and do a lot more work for us?
And a short answer, yes. Like there's definitely different skills to work within the city environment required, but good operators will be available to adapt and work in with key businesses to be able to deliver what's needed for the city.
Excellent. And then I guess picking up on Sam's point there about the deliverability with the design and project management side of things, is that something that your industry could help with as well?
Yeah, I think you'll see a drop in the other work for design, so they'll be more interested and more able to do more work and quicker for the council.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Mark. And
Cool.
thank you, Jeremy.
Thanks very much for your time. I like your badge.
So welcome David Hawke from the Horswell Residents Association. Let's do 1 minute ahead, that's good. And
You ready to roll?
yes, far away. Welcome.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, tēnā koutou. I'm David Hawke, so I'm Secretary of Horsell Residents Association, and with me today is John Bennett, our Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity to present our draft annual plan submission. But I guess before I start, what an amazing thing it was to see George Laxton in here, someone in their 20s actually coming up to council. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyway, the big issue that we're dealing with is growth in Horsell, and it's a busy time for people in the community sector. So we presented yesterday to ECAN on their draft annual plan, and we had plenty of things to say to them. But from our submission to you, there were three things that we wanted to highlight. One was public transport priority, another was community facilities, and the third one was development contributions. So if we go to the public transport question first, we've got three agencies that are endeavouring, I hope, to build a fit-for-purpose public transport system from Horswell. So Waka Kotahi and City Council are doing the public transport priority lane, and ECAN is organising the actual buses. So we got a commitment last week from our MPs, Megan Woods and Tracy McClellan, that Waka Kotahi is on schedule for its part. We also know that ECAN won't do anything about a rejigged public transport system along that corridor until the public transport priority lanes are completed. They've told us so. So that brings us to City Council. And I have to say we're rather apprehensive because it took 2 years after the final approval of the public transport priority through Addington Village to actually begin construction. Although now it's done, it's amazing. It's a really nice piece of work and a credit to Council. So from your draft annual plan, We see that there's a drop in funding for 2023-24 for the section of the public transport priority that it's responsible for, and it's not programmed for completion until, quote, 2025-26 or beyond. We're sort of okay with the 2025-26, but we're really worried, given the history of delay through Addington Village, about the or beyond bit. If we turn now to community facilities, in Horsfall we have a swathe of new houses that stretch from Murphy's Road, which is in the sort of southwest, through to Country Palms, coming round to Horsfall Road, Sutherland's Road and beyond, but there are no community facilities for that large number of houses that are planned. We go into this in a lot more detail in our submission, but you will see in our submission that we've backed up our ideas with quite a lot of community consultation of our own that supports what we say. And that brings us to development contributions. Given what I've just said about the need for community facilities in that large area of Horsfall, you need to keep development contributions collected in Horsfall for Horsfall projects. The need is certainly there. But what we see is City Council proposing to top up Matatiki, the Hornby Centre, with $1.84 million from development contributions. That's over 1,800 houses worth of development contributions. That project has had major cost overruns. When that facility was consulted on, we used lots of international, so we being Horsfall Residents Association, used lots of international evidence to say that putting it on an old landfill was writing a blank cheque, but we were ignored. And so it's pretty galling now to see that City Council is using our money to pay for your mistake. Kia ora, thanks for listening.
Sobering message. Tim?
It was very clear from the Hornby community that that's where they wanted it. So just we do have to take into account community views. The other one was the delay with the Lincoln Road. As you well know, the Addington community in that part of the network is a very sensitive and bottleneck, and so we did have to go and be sensitive through there, and we have got a good end result with everybody on board with that. So that's there are reasons why there's like delays, etc.
Yeah, we've had this conversation quite a few times. Yeah, that's right. I'd have to say that there was a lot of sensitivity through Addington, and sure, we understand that. But you wait till you get down that section of Horsfall Road. There's going to be a fair bit of sensitivity through there as well. And Council is going to need to stick to its guns, or not to its guns, it's going to need to stick to its timeline to make sure that it actually delivers on time.
Right, and just quickly, Andre?
Thank you very much. Can you please just touch a little bit more on what sort of amounts of development contributions are being paid in Horsfall and how much currently is planned to be spent on community infrastructure in Horsfall from those development contributions?
You're asking for numbers that I...
Well, no. Not precise numbers, but touch on the general...
Well, again, I don't have that sort of information in front of me. But if you look at 1,800 houses, which is the number that's heading off, that's probably maybe a third of the houses that are being built in that area that we're talking about. So there'll be about 5,000-6,000 houses in there. So you're siphoning off a substantial proportion of the development contributions set aside for community facilities for something somewhere else. And I think I just have to say, in terms of the Hornby thing, we don't begrudge them their facility at all, nor do we begrudge the spending or anything like that. What we are begrudging is that the money that's collected for facilities in Horsfall is being spent somewhere else.
Thank you. And thank you for an excellent submission. Really appreciate you coming in and speaking to it as well.
Okay.
So time's up. Thank you. All right, Mel Graham. Mel Graham here? No. Joanna's here? Joanna. Oh, should we go to Joanna then? Joanna, would you like to come up? Thank you. Lorena, nice to see you.
Good afternoon, yeah. Deputy
Yes,
Mayor, I should
it is
say,
too,
and
it is
councillors.
too. There's the time flying.
The 10 Shirley Road site has historically been a place of learning since 1915, when the original Shirley Primary School was built. The foundation stone was laid on the 16th of June 1915. In May 1977, the building and the site became surplus to the Ministry of Education requirements. In March 1978, Shirley Community Centre opened as a place for cultural, educational and recreational activities. It was a Category 2 historic place and was demolished in 2012 due to earthquake damage. To be honest, after 5 years advocating for this site, I didn't know what more I could say in my submission this year. It wasn't until I started trying to condense my research into the 15 pages you have before you that I reread the 2015 Shirley Community Facility Rebuild Report. And well done. If you clicked on all the links in my written submission, you deserve a gold star. The key point I would like to highlight today is found in option 4, do not build a community facility at 10 Shirley Road. In the legal implications section, the land at 10 Shirley Road is classified as reserve, vested in council by the Crown to be held in trust for local purpose, site for a community centre. That means that the land cannot be used for any other purpose than a community centre unless and until the reserve classification is changed. It also appears that the land could not simply sit vacant with the reserve status unchanged, as that would also be inconsistent with the reserve purpose. Option 4 does not restore the service available pre-earthquake on what was a popular, heavily used site, and it's unlikely to be acceptable to the community. This was reported in the 2015 report. 8 years after this report was written, residents have seen no further progress to reinstate their local community facility, and the land has been left vacant. The current 2030-2031 funding timeframe does not align with the purpose of the reserve status and legal implications, or the district plan changes where housing intensification has already exceeded predicted population density in the suburbs surrounding the reserve. Our demographics have changed. Our rates have increased by 59%. We have a climate change emergency, yet we can't live local and go local when we have no suburban-sized libraries in the Inners Ward. For the last 5 years, I have been highlighting why this site is so important to our community's wellbeing. A draft concept plan needs to be created and costed now, before a detailed budget can be presented to Council for approval. We have been waiting for a rebuild since 2012. Council doesn't have to buy the land or have an existing building demolished, so let's get on with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Now, has anyone got a question? Oh, Kelly.
Thank you, Pauline. Wonderful. Thanks for that, Mel. I knew that facility extremely well. Had lots of meetings and things like that. It was a great facility. Is there access to the school across the road for community events? And also with the North Hub just down the road of North Parade, has that changed your expectations about?
Because what I've presented from the beginning since 2018 is not just a standard traditional community centre. It's a learning library, which involves putting a community centre building that has the resources that a library has, with learning spaces, flexible spaces, meeting rooms, all that we don't have in our Inners Ward. And the closest option is the Shirley Library, which isn't fit for purpose, it isn't big enough, it doesn't have those facilities available, and so our community is missing out or having to travel to other libraries.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. No other questions? Thank you very much for your submission, Joanna. Now, so did we have Mel Graham here yet? No. Someone just come in. Who have we got? Will Ver? Will? No. So Victoria. There's someone coming in now.
I'll just go and get.
Welcome, Victoria. So you're here to do 2 in a row?
Yes.
Yep.
And with your permission, if possible, if the trust exceeds its time, my submission overlaps with the Civic Trust, so would that be acceptable if we
Have they not done
merge
this
into my time?
Has
Or
the
if there are questions?
Has the Civic Trust not done this yet? No.
Happy with that, aren't
10 minutes in total? Yeah, so is 10 minutes in total?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And is there somebody who could distribute this paperwork to the councillors, please? And I'd like to introduce Mike Norris, who's the chairman of the Akaroa Civic Trust, and Chris Mangles, who is on our board. So Mike will actually be presenting the submission, and we'll let Mike lead off.
Okay, thanks, Victoria. First of all, this is our first appearance in front of the new council. A few familiar faces here and a few not so familiar. I'm not sure if Tyrone's here today, is he?
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh, yeah, good, good. Welcome, Tyrone, to your new lofty position. I noticed that the mayor is absent, so we're very pleased to be in front of you, Pauline.
Oh, yeah, I know. I thought you might be. That's
Yeah, well,
good.
we've discussed things before. And the Civic Trust always likes to try and produce a lively presentation because there's quite often a lot of fairly solid stuff you have to cope with. So, first of all, may I just ask amongst the assembled multitude, how many of you have never visited the Britomart Memorial in Akaroa? Hands up if you have not. That's interesting, okay. So forgive me, therefore, for a little bit of background. Victoria has produced an excellent summary for her submission, or our submission, but it is predicated on having some awareness of the history of what caused the Britomart Memorial to be erected. It was erected in late Victorian times to do with Queen Victoria's Jubilee years, and it commemorated the arrival in 1840 of a British corvette, the Britomart, which had been up in the Bay of Islands, and Governor Hobson and co. had overheard that the French ship, the L'Orbe, and what was the other one, Comte de Paris, were making their way to Akaroa to set up the French flag and declare a French settlement. So the Britomart sped on its way, made a record journey, and got there 1 week before the French did, and therefore the flag was planted at what is now the Britomart Reserve on Stanley Point there. Now, it's been much in the news of late in council context because, much to your credit, the Christchurch City Council and Onuku Marae have conceived and executed part one of the Takapuneki Historic Reserve, which was the focal point of our Matariki celebrations last year. And there's obviously a stage two, and I think it's really heartening that this week Rick Tainui of the Onuku Runanga expressed strong support for what the Civic Trust is advocating, that we take a look at the Britomart Memorial and at last wake up and do some work on it, because we've been talking about this for years. Even in 2018, the City Council set up a working committee to decide what to do with it, but like a lot of things, it went down a rabbit hole and got nowhere. So we have been nagging the council for a long time, and there couldn't be a better moment to bring forward some plans, if there are any, to properly develop the site so it's worthy of being a good neighbour to Takapuneki, because they're right next door to each other. And you've done such a wonderful job at Takapuneki. And by contrast, the neglect at the Britomart Reserve is palpable. If we could have the picture of the Britomart first. And so that's what it is, designed by a local architect, S.C. Farr, and erected really to commemorate the arrival of British shipping to Akaroa in 1840. And if, in my opinion, and a lot of people share this, that puts the Britomart Reserve and this point on a par with Waitangi in terms of its significance nationally, because it was after the massacres of 1830 at Takapuneki and another one at Onawi in 1832, that I think the Maori community were very keen to have some support from a British government, and they were very happy, I believe, by the time 1840 came round, to be signatories to the Treaty of Waitangi. So I think Little Akaroa's Takapuneki and Britomart Reserve can lay claim to being right up there as a reserve of national significance. And the fact that, and there's no shame on you that you haven't been to see it, those of you who put your hands up, it's a fairly anonymous and inaccessible memorial. So, Victoria, if we can have a look at that other slide with the relationship to...
It's not moving.
Isn't it? Oh, well, I can add lib.
Oh, there.
Yeah,
There it
here
is.
we go.
Yeah.
It's in a pretty bad state of disrepair and neglect. The approach is past fallen tree stumps. It's tatty. There's no disabled access, and it is a very poor sister to its elegant neighbour, the Po at Takapuneki. So we don't think it's very difficult to find a reason to suggest that funding should be made available. I personally had been prepared to go out and find a sponsor to fund the cost of doing some interpretive panels and bringing this up to a standard that we could be proud of. But I was persuaded by colleagues on the Civic Trust that it's not the responsibility of a private donor. It's fairly and squarely in the council's domain. So I hope that you see it that way as well. It's, let me say, the obvious areas would be disabled access, landscaping, and interpretive panels. It's never going to become what it should be if we don't take this opportunity of spending some time and some money on it. So I'd welcome the councillors the opportunity when you next come to admire the Po and the Takapuneki Historic Reserve as you move into stage 2, that you take a look at the Britomart Memorial and realise what a state of dilapidation it's in and how much it could be improved.
Thank you.
Could I just add too that we would like to support and compliment Rick Tainui and Debbie T. Cowell for what they have been able to achieve with the support of Christchurch City Council in developing the first phase of Takapuneki. And we're very, very pleased in the second phase, which this slide shows, that they have provided a link to the Britomart Memorial. And what that means, I'm not quite sure, because as soon as you access the memorial, it's overgrown in 2 to 3 meter bush, and there is no formed footpath. There is no access from Beach Road, except for an awkward flight of stairs and a bare piece of earth. So they've taken it up to a point which we greatly appreciate, but we would ask the council to take the next step and build on a very important report that was commissioned through Banks Peninsula District Council, which was a conservation plan for the Britomart Memorial by Ian Bowman, who's one of the most highly regarded conservation architects in New Zealand. This was published in 2002, and it's been on the shelf ever since. There's been no conservation work. There has been no landscaping. When I was there last week, the grass has not been cut, and all the broken tree branches are just thrown over the fence line. There is zero regard for one of the most important historic sites on the South Island. And it sticks out like a sore thumb right at the time, as Rick said yesterday, you've got hundreds of groups coming to Akaroa now to view Takapuneki, in addition to all those school children who utilize the Akaroa Museum. They come through town, they will be visiting this historic site and going on to Anuku Marae. It is a minor amount of money and a very minor amount of effort to take it to the next step. You have the in-house facilities to do that. You have a very competent heritage team and you have a parks division. And if we could work in association with Anuku Runanga, they have an excellent program and they have proved what can be achieved. Everything is in line to make that closer association with the Britomart Memorial. And the time to do it is now, with a small amount of money, seed money, to start that process in place. So the only other part of our submission really is that we remind you to adequately fund the Akaroa Museum. It needs operational funding per annum. It is a huge resource, not only for the community, but also for our local businesses who survive on tourism, because it is a visitor facility. It accommodates numerous school children, school groups. I was talking to the director yesterday, and the number of school groups coming through is just skyrocketing because of Takapuneki. So it's a council facility. It's run on a highly professional manner, and it's very, very important, not only to us in the community, but to all visitors coming to Akaroa. So we do appreciate your support. It's probably one of the most outstanding regional museums in the country because of its high professionalism. And basically, we're just asking that you pay attention to Banks Peninsula as much as possible, because this is on everyone's radar now.
Yeah.
And especially with regard to the Britomart Memorial, we'd like to move that project forward sooner rather than later.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Our time is up, but look, I will allow, there's 2 questions, Tyler and Kelly.
Is
You
that
wanna
our 10
trade with
minutes
Kelly?
up or 5 minutes?
Well,
it's on 10. Doesn't time fly?
Yes, it does. Okay. Oh, okay. We've had a cancellation. So is everyone okay if we go for a bit longer on this? For a couple of minutes? So that means we can have the 3 questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Tyler, Kelly and Tyrone.
Kia ora. Thank you for that. Just for a bit of background, Uncle Rick is a relation of mine through other runanga, and he actually talked about the Britomart Memorial, of which I haven't visited, but I've visited the bays. I'm not telling you what diving spots there are, but I was wondering, he did highlight that the Britomart Memorial itself would like a little bit of TLC. Could you elaborate a bit more on that and your views on the repairs that the memorial itself might need?
The memorial itself has not seriously been looked at since 2002 when Ian Bowman was here. It requires cleaning on a regular basis. My concern, personally, is through the earthquakes, if the earth has actually slumped. I went out after the September quake that afternoon and checked the Britomart, and one of the plaques had fallen off. It seemed to be okay, but over the course of the past 10 or 13 years, there are bigger and bigger cracks because it's got a concrete retaining wall that was installed in around 1840, and the cracks are just widening, and there's no one gauging, what is actually happening, what's causing those cracks.
In the interests of time, I think we would need to get staff to have a bit of a look at that. And Kelly, can we make our questions snappy? Please?
Oui, bonjour. Merci pour votre présentation. I'm glad my English ancestors came here before my French ones. I think it's wonderful that you guys are representing this part of our history, and I love the fact that you're talking with mana whenua about this. Have you discussed with them a general partnership to look at doing something together?
I, through the Civic Trust, have worked very closely with Inuku Runanga for almost 25 years, with George Decal, Piri Tainui, and Rick Harry Evison, a number of people who it's been a privilege to walk alongside. The Civic Trust has always strongly supported and fought for Takapuneki, and Inuku Runanga has recognized this, and they're coming along in support of us now to have the Britomart Memorial put in its rightly state and position and condition. The original conservation report, which was completed in 2008, joined the 2 sites. They were one. And then Anuku Runanga, through several of the members, said they wanted to have a separate entity because of the vestiges of colonialism, which is totally understandable. So the site was basically divided and separated off. And now there's a new understanding or a more viable approach in that it's more unified again.
Sure.
So I'm hoping now, I see Rick Tainui on occasion, and we have numerous conversations, and I'm hoping to meet up with he and Debbie T. Cowell, the landscape architect, in May, because their expertise and what they have achieved on that site is just stupendous. We don't need to recreate the
Exactly.
wheel. We need to follow what they have led.
Thanks.
How much do you need, do you think?
I have no idea.
We don't know.
Okay.
Tyrone. But we
Kia ora.
will find out.
Thank you. I'll make this. Thank you, Mike, Victoria, and Chris, for your very comprehensive submission. And I happened to be at the Akaroa Museum yesterday, and I can assure you what an incredible asset that is for the city. And there's an amazing exhibition of photography on there at the moment that I would encourage everyone to attend. But my question is, I understand there's currently an application in progress to make I'm not sure if it's the Takapuneki site or the Britomart site or both combined, but for national reserve status, which I understand council is currently handling. And I would imagine you would like an update on that, where that's at. Yeah. Would that be a fair assumption?
Very much so.
Yes, and unfortunately, my understanding is it's specifically for the Takapuneki site. In my view, it would be nice if the two sites were jointly recognized because it's an interwoven history. But
Sounds
that's not
logical,
my call.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
So should we make that as an action to get some information?
Yeah. It would be good if council was kept closely informed, especially since Carmel Cepoloni spoke at Matariki as the representative from government, and she's now Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Culture and Heritage. It's a very good opportunity to follow up as quickly as possible.
So I'll just check that we've got consensus around the table for us to follow that up. Is everyone happy with that? And then also the other, cheers, and Tyrone's, have you? That's me done. So the other thing was to, I was just wondering if we could dig out the Banks Peninsula Conservation Plan of 2002.
I can email a copy to you.
Would that help, Lynn?
Look, I'm sure the relevant staff will be able to come back with an update on
And also
this.
to remember that Waitangi will be commemorated at Anuku in February.
And then the other thank you. The other thing is, do we want staff advice on investigating the any operational maintenance work on the reserve and the memorial in Britomart?
So my suggestion would be that we pick this up with the head of service and identify where it is currently at and come back with an update to councillors.
Happy with that? Is everyone happy with that? Sarah?
My understanding, Pauline, from the email we got sort of at the beginning of the process was that staff are currently going through every single submission and getting advice for us on every point that everyone is making on every submission.
Yep.
So all of that advice will be coming.
That's great.
Rather
So
than us asking
we
for
don't
separately.
need a specific action for every single one.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our time.
Thank you.
Thank
Madam,
you.
Deputy Mayor, may I just summarise one thing? You asked about the relationship with Onuku Marae, and I think Victoria's expressed that it is a very cordial one. And I think Onuku respect the Civic Trust for the intervention made mainly by Victoria and others in the early 2000s when a less enlightened council than you were proposing to subdivide and put into public or private housing the land that now occupied by Takapuneki Reserve. Got to remember, even in the 1980s and 90s, the council permitted a rubbish tip and a sewage disposal area to be located right there. And you look back now and you think, how could that happen? But it did. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're quite right. All right, we now have Mel Graham. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you.
So you have 5 minutes, and that includes question time. So if you want questions, you have to come in under the 5.
Yeah.
Go.
Okay.
When you're ready.
I'll just quickly go through the things that I'm not really going to focus on just so I get them done. For water, I definitely think that what we have right now is fine. I don't think the limit should be raised because I think it's not a criminal offence. It's paying for the infrastructure that you are utilising if you are one of the biggest users of water. So I think it's fair that that's what you do. Also, in terms of, oh, what if I'm growing a veggie garden or something, then yeah, potentially you might save money in the long run because you're getting your own veggies, so I wouldn't see that as an issue either. For, I think it was vacant land, I definitely think that people who own land that they're not using should have to pay a higher rate of tax on it, based on the fact that by owning that land, they are preventing anyone else from being able to do anything with it, and that's quite frustrating when, especially when it's in the city or if it's in an area that would be nice to have people going and doing things with. There should be an incentive to either do something with it or give the land to someone else so it can be used for the community. And for land that the council owns at the moment, and the queries of what to do with it, my biggest thing was don't sell it, because there will be opportunities to use it for things in the future, and if the council gives up land, that's another thing probably going to a private owner, and that opportunity is lost. Okay, so my main point that I wanted to get to was cycling and the Wheels to Wings project, and I very much think that it should not be delayed. So from my personal perspective, I've been cycling for, well, since I was about 10 or 11, and part of that was because we were in a car crash. The car got written off. I cycled to school right from year 7 to year 13, and so I very much feel kind of what it's like to be a cyclist, and the answer is not that great. I've been hit by a car twice while cycling on the roads. I was following all the road rules. They were both during the day, and yeah, they were both the driver not even noticing I was there until I was right in front of them. And it wasn't that I was in a blind spot, it was that they weren't looking out for me. So the infrastructure we have in Christchurch is not designed for cyclists to be included in the current road networks, and protected cycleways allows for safer cycling. It will allow for people to feel better about cycling. I've got one friend who has been wanting to cycle for years now, but hasn't plucked up the courage yet because she's so scared of cycling on the roads. Every time she wants to cycle, I have to go to her house and I have to lead the way, and she just follows whatever I do. And then, let's see, there's an attitude of annoyance against cyclists, and that quite frustrates me, because there are things like, oh, they think they own the road, they're so full of themselves, and that's definitely not the case. When you're on the road on a bike, you feel the environment so much more than when you're in a car. Sitting in a car, you've got your cushioned seat, you aren't feeling what the temperature's like outside or the wind rushing past you. You don't sense just how big a vehicle can be based on the sound it makes as it comes up behind you. And I can hear how big the vehicle will be as I'm cycling, and if it sounds really big, then I'm always tensing up because I don't know if they've made enough room for me, and all I can do is look straight ahead and hope. So that's not fun. And let's say there are sometimes complaints about, oh, cyclists always use the footpath. That sometimes is kind of fair. Like, I'll cycle on the footpath if I'm on Blenheim Road, even though there's a cycle lane, because it's much safer, and the risk I pose to pedestrians is way smaller than the risk cars pose to me.
Yeah. Mel, do you want to take any questions?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So Tyler and then Celeste, but very quickly because we've only got 28 seconds.
Sure. Kia ora, Mel. I'm going to be very fast. Thank you for talking to me about your lived experience, and it's really sad to hear that stuff. I want to ask firstly, where are you living at the moment? Where do you usually travel?
Living in Upper Ickerton, but I went to Hagley College, so...
You and me both. How good.
Yeah.
In both ways. The next question I have is, talking on that lived experience, where are the biggest pressure points for you in our ward?
I would say probably Riccarton Road and Blenheim Road are kind of the biggest risks are also Yaldhurst Road. That's a big one to try and work around. But the collisions that I had, one of them was actually turning onto Hereford Street from the museum direction.
Oh, wow.
And the other one was on Kirkwood Ave as I was cycling into town.
Right.
And also my partner has been, he was hit by a car 2 months ago. And if you looked at the scab on his knee, you would have thought it was a fortnight back. And he was wearing high vis in the middle of the day. So.
Right. Celeste?
Hi Mel, I just want to say thanks very much for coming in, and I just want to acknowledge your point around perhaps sometimes we don't hear from very diverse group of people. Just a quick question around the Union and Collingwood Street. That's the old Plunkett building, I believe. Why is that important to you? Like, why is that on the list of ones that you would like us to hold on to?
Yep, so for that, I was actually in a voice call with a bunch of people when we were filling in the form. It was pretty cool. But I was sharing what I saw on my screen, and we just went through the whole list of addresses and went on to Google Maps Street View to have a look at what was there, because we didn't actually know any of the addresses. So I don't know what it looks like at the moment, because the building was there in some condition on the pictures, and it might not be like that anymore. But my thinking was, if it's owned by the council and if there is still a building there, or if that piece of land is owned, part of it was it's in the New Brighton area, which is well known as a deprived area, and it would be really good to have community things going on there to bring people together. Especially, I mentioned youth work as a suggestion, and that was because there really isn't enough infrastructure at the moment to support things like mental health, and that's been realised as people have started reaching out and realising we don't have the services to meet the demands that have started happening.
That's a very good answer.
Thank you very much, because we've had a bit of feedback about that building already, so that's useful. Thank you.
Thanks, Celeste. Alrighty, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And lucky last, Cameron.
Pauline, just before this, based on Mel, and actually a couple of young people who come through here, it's actually setting a really good precedent for diversity of thought for our young people to be thinking outside the box. Mel went through every single property to look at the assets. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And if there's other ways to be able to look at ways of engagement for our young people, that would be awesome if we can look at some alternative means to go through annual plan stuff.
Always open to suggestions.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, Mel. Right, Cameron. So you know the Gen 5 minutes, and if you want questions, just leave it at a time.
And I'll be quick so you can go to lunch.
Oh, thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you for having me here today. I would like to make just a quick few points about my submission. The main one is primarily around rates and future generations' level of service. So it's great to see levels of service being considered in association with the rates changes that we're proposing. However, there is a big black spot there in what the rates changes we're limiting ourselves to now impose on future generations, and that's in terms of infrastructure debt, and the other big one is climate change debt as well. So we know that climate change is coming. It seems to be getting closer and closer every year. Funny that. And we know we've got a commitment to meet by 2030. However, I really struggle to see how our city, led by this organisation, is going to meet those goals. I also note that we are having significant economic impacts from climate change already, such as things like the cyclone, as well as things like the emissions trading scheme auction that failed earlier this year and triggered a bunch of things. Really, I understand, because the markets did not believe that we were going to address climate change like the emissions trading scheme was designed to do. There's also the estimates of future costs of climate change in the billions of dollars. When we ignore them, what we are saying is that our children can pay for them, and we don't have to. So I would really encourage you to increase rates to the level that they need to be at to pay for the infrastructure that we need to sustain a level of service now and in future generations that we've afforded in the past several decades. I note the reference point for the annual plan is the long-term plan. So I think at the very minimum we should be meeting that. But I also note that I don't think the long-term plan will give us the same level of service in future generations that we afford now and have in the past. I wanted to pull out a specific point from one of the reports that you received on the annual plan. And it's a note around, it's fantastic that climate change must be considered in all reports, but there's a little policy implication talking about climate change considerations. And I'll just read this quote from the report. This annual plan continues with the climate change commitment set out in the 2021 LTP and sets the stage for further initiatives in the 2024 LTP. I don't really know what that means, and to me, it's kind of beaten around the bush in that how does this report actually impact climate change? So I would really, in that section, like to see, this is an annual plan setting out our plan of work for the next year in association with the long-term plan over the next 10 years. I believe these policy implications should be how is this annual plan going to achieve or not achieve those goals? What is the trajectory that we're working towards? And it's not that data is not available. We've got Climate Change Commission. We've got an ESR research team at the University of Canterbury. There's plenty of people. You've got your own staff who will be well experienced in this kinds of thing. So I don't think there's any excuse for just really ignoring that level of detail. I'll leave it there and give you a minute if you would like to.
Right, we've got Tyler.
Kia ora, thank you for that. It was phenomenal. Only question I have is around that point that you talked about around seeing how we're tracking. Would you like to see somewhat of a graph to see how we're tracking per annual plan, to see where we're at in regards to our goal for 2030?
So it's not the historical that I'm interested, it's that what is the plan that we're putting up for the future look like? Because at the moment I see our emissions maybe slowing a little bit, but I don't see anything going to cause them to drop, right? And theoretically, I believe our current long-term plan takes us into 2030. So if our long-term plan doesn't contain anything that's going to change that trajectory, how are we going to meet that goal?
All right, Sarah.
Thanks so much. And I will just point out that the long-term plan doesn't just do a 10-year budget past 2030, but it includes a 30-year infrastructure strategy, which takes us well past our net neutral and our proper neutral targets and those kind of things as well. So that's coming up as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
Well, perfect. Thank you for a really, really interesting submission. Really appreciate you coming in. It's really good.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice lunch.
Cheers. All right, so we'll adjourn the meeting. Oh, any actions from there? We got them, didn't we? We'll adjourn the meeting until next time, which is tomorrow, 10 a.m. Ooh.